All right, and we are live. Hello, everybody. I'm BMillzebub, and welcome to my channel. For tonight's Apostate interviews, you may recall her from when the Wonder Lady did. Was it an Inquisition? Did she Inquisition you?
No, it's just a regular.
No? Okay. You may remember from Wonder Lady's regular interview with her. Wait till you get Inquisitioned. um, But you may recognize her from the Wonder Lady. This is Lily Cuervo. Lily, why don't you introduce yourself?
I don't know what to say. I'm I'm just I should be a familiar face. I'm just little old me. I have my little channel on my Twitter, and I'm an ex-Muslim, and I talk about that. I don't really talk about things from simply an atheist perspective. I have to admit, I kind of focus um on the ex-Muslim perspective, maybe a little too much. And anything you want to know about my background?
I'm sure we'll get into that.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so you mentioned being an ex-Muslim. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was raised in the religion. Both my parents converted before I was born, and they went very hard, and they just really indulged themselves, you know, both feet first, and wanted uh, to raise all of their kids to be very devout Muslims, and that didn't work out so well. But but I'd say that the earlier years were like the more strict, and then they kind of eased off the older I got after, you know, I want to say like 15, 20 years. After 20 years, they had kind of been like uh, burnt out and didn't really care as much. And
Yeah.
my parents, they got divorced, whatever, but my mom married an imam. So from about, I want to say, the age of 6 to, well, not 16, yeah, 17, 18ish. Uh, I basically grew up in a mosque. I would go and listen to my stepdad giving the sermon every Friday.
I'd imagine being that religious for that long is exhausting. Might be a good way to put it.
Yeah, especially it's such a demanding uh, mentality. 5 times a day, every day. It's impossible. It really is. Five
I
times a
mean,
day, and then extra stuff.
yeah, I mean, most people can barely find the time to fit the actual things that they have to do in during the day. You have to shower, you have to eat, you have to work. There are all these things you have to do, and then you have this ancillary kind of thing like praying 5 times a day.
Well, all of the other stuff goes on showering and eating and working goes on the back burner. That's kind of the reason why some people refer to Islam as a cult. I don't refer to it because of the death stuff and the barbarity. I refer to it because of the fact that it takes over people's lives so completely, and so they're like, everything else doesn't matter. You have to dedicate your life to this. The All the other stuff is just temporary. This is, the important thing, and you have to have that as your first priority always. So if you're working a double shift and you want to stop to pray, but you only have a certain amount of breaks, you know whatever, some people will, expect you to risk your job to stop to pray, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah, it's definitely not having food for tomorrow or a place to sleep that's, warm.
Yeah.
Now, did you have to pray at specific times, or could you just knock it all out at once?
No, it's at the designated times. The times are a little bit flexible because it's based on the cycle of the sun, and Muhammad didn't have a wristwatch, so the times they're like a little flexible. But some people will. It depends on how strict the person is. But usually, even if you're like an hour late to doing it, I would get away with saying like, well, at least I'm doing it. It's better than not doing it at all.
All right. So, is it in any way correct to say that there are roughly as many different forms of Islam as there are, say, Christianity, or am I off the mark on that?
I don't know how many forms of Christianity there are, but I would say that's probably accurate because when I was a Muslim, I wasn't aware of how many different types of Islam there were and how many different ways that people practice. And that's because there's a saying that my mom used to say, which I later learned wasn't true, which was like, there are no different types of Muslim. We're all just Muslim. Like, we're all considered from the same thing. And that's something you might hear. I've seen someone say that on Twitter, that they were told that, and then they found out, like, yay, that's completely not true, because if you compare the way that people practice in different countries, you can clearly see the differences.
Yeah, I mean the three that I can name offhand are Shia, Sunni, and Wahhabist. And from what I understand, Wahhabist is one of the most strict and
Mm-hmm.
violent, would probably be.
Yeah, I used to I think it's pretty similar to Salafi because that's what they call themselves. But it's funny because I guess you can be a Sunni and a Salafi, because Salafi just basically means the more strict interpretation, or trying. A self-proclaimed Salafi would say they're trying to practice as close as possible to the way it was practiced back then. But even that, if you they don't have specific names sometimes, but if you compare the way someone in Pakistan or India, an Indian Muslim, to, I don't know, a Nigerian Muslim, they're going to practice differently, and I think that has to do with cultural influences, and even like the Nation of Islam and the subsects of that have branched off. I consider those all like different sections.
Well, see, I'm wondering how you can dare to call the one true. I can't even get through it with a straight face. I was gonna make a joke about the one true form of Islam, but I lost it.
What is it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not, when I was younger, I guess I would have said that in Saudi Arabia they practice as close as possible to what's supposed to be the true Islam. But nowadays, Muslims don't like to say that, and they say, "Oh no, Saudi Arabia's not even practicing correctly. That's not real Sharia." So I'm kind of surprised by that, because when I was Muslim, I was like, "Yeah, that's Sharia. Why are you denying it?" But there are no Scotsmen here.
I'm sure there's one somewhere in the chat. I could be wrong. But like, do you remember the name of the form of Islam you practiced?
I would just say Sunni.
Sunni. Okay. I'm actually not very familiar with most forms of Islam, so could you
Sunni is the
elaborate?
most common one. If you did, a poll or a Pew survey and really had to separate them into sections, Sunni would be the largest and most common one. So it's funny when that's what I address in my videos, and when I'm speaking in general, I address Sunni Islam. So then when people give, I guess, a rebuttal from like a Shia perspective, I'm like, well, I still have problems with Shia Islam, but it's just irrelevant to me because they're not in the majority. Well, I'm not saying that they're irrelevant, but but I take a different approach when I find out that I'm talking to a Sunni. I mean, sorry, a Shia, because it's like, oh, now I have to find out what you believe because I'm not gonna impose what I think you believe, and try to straw man you.
You do better than pretty much anyone else does when, say it's a religious person talking to an atheist. They don't really seem to give a damn what we believe. But,
Yeah.
I'm leading myself down to a completely unrelated tangent, so I'm just going to swing right back into it. I'm kind of curious, what were the specific times that you had to pray during the day?
Well, Fajr is basically sunrise. Well, it's before sunrise. It's when the first, quoting here, when the first finger of light has started to grace the sky, but the sun isn't completely up yet. and then there's the noon one and the mid-afternoon one, and then there's the sunset one, and then there's the after sunset one, so the twilight one. So those are the 5. And this this is the test to see if I was a true Muslim. I can name them all. I can tell you how many rak'ah is in it. I know the whole shebang. I guess the prayer wasn't even my biggest issue, not in the least. That's like a minuscule thing to me. And if someone wants to pray, if someone wants to pray 5 times a day or 1 time a day or how many times a day, I really don't care. I just think that it should be a personal thing, but it gets forced so much. What I mean by that is that parents forcing their children and forcing their other relatives and putting so much pressure on just people in general to other people to pray when it's like, this is supposed to be personal. If this is my conversation with my deity or whatever, how are you going to force me to have a conversation? What am I going to tell him? Hey, dude, I'm here because Simon asked me to come. I don't know what to talk to you about. I have a much bigger problem with things such as like the fasting for a month aspect. I've talked about it before. I have huge problems with that because most people think it's an adult thing, and I talked about it on Wonder Lady's interview that I did with her, and I said that it's forced on children a lot more than people realize. So
yeah, I actually recall that conversation. You mentioned that I want to say it was the school you went to just didn't serve lunch.
Oh yeah, when was that? Like 2 weeks ago or so, the last time I was on? Yeah, that's true. It was a private Islamic school, and for that month, here's the thing. It was a K-12, so like kindergarten and those grades, they were allowed to have lunch. The cafeteria was open for them, but so it's not like the cafeteria was completely shut down and non-functional. But for the older grades, like the junior high, middle school, junior high, or high school, I think it was K through 6 got to eat, or K through 5, and then 6 to 12 had the cafeteria was closed during the times that we had our free period. And instead of having study hall or something during the time slot that would have been lunch, we actually had we had obligatory sitting in a carpeted hall reading the Quran when we would have been eating lunch.
Hmm. See, that's interesting. I mean, you had to read the Quran. There was no other option during this
Well, I
time.
couldn't just go and decline. There was a loophole. There was one loophole, and it didn't allow you to it didn't allow me to eat, but it got me out of reading the Quran. And it's, for the girls, if it's that time of the month, they're not allowed to fast, and we're also not allowed to touch the actual book itself because we're so filthy and unclean that if we touch it, I don't know what'll happen. It'll burst into flames or something. So we weren't allowed to read the book during that time of the month. So we basically had to sit outside, like alone, for for 45 minutes. Like, couldn't go to. And I remember walking into the cafeteria and just seeing how dead and closed everything was, and I was furious.
Oh, see, that's interesting because I can't remember exactly where it is in the Bible, but you know, a woman who's on her period can't. She's actually supposed to leave the house while she's on her period. It's interesting to see how many religions are just kind of freaked out by the female body and the shit that it does every month. Um, like, do you remember anything from the Quran that explains exactly why this is?
It's not about it's not in the Quran itself, but it's a lot in hadith about the different taboos around surrounding women during menstruation and anything that had to do with lady parts. Um, I feel like the hadith are kind of contradictory. They paint Muhammad to be a character that was equally freaked out and grossed out and thought of it as a taboo, but also during certain times he didn't care because there's some okay, it's a little graphic here, but there's some hadiths about him I don't know how to say this in any other way, fingering his wives when they were on their uh, on their stuff.
That's kind of like, on the one hand, he's weirded out by menstruation, and if
when
I
it comes to a sexual situation, like, it's all totally fine. But when they're fully clothed, they're dirty and they're unclean and they can't touch the book and they can't touch you. And if you accidentally brush against your wife when she's on her period, it'll nullify your ritual cleansing or something. And you definitely can't have relations when she's on her stuff.
yeah, that I actually lost track of how many contradictions there were in that. You can't have relations
You
with
can't
your
have
wife.
you can't have intercourse, but you can have foreplay, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's still kind of a contradiction, though, and I know I'm nitpicking a little, but come on, you
But
know.
it's just filled. I mean, the whole thing is filled with contradictions like this, and if you bring it to someone's attention who's heavily indoctrinated, they'll say, "That's not a contradiction. There's a reason for everything. There's reason for this. I don't know the reason, but there must be a reason." I think the reason is that I absolutely 100% think that the character of Muhammad, if he existed, had OCD and possibly anorexia nervosa, but that's a whole other story. I have strong reasons for believing this. I mean, who knows how many hadith are fabricated, but the ones that we have access to, if you read them and believe them, it just paints him as such a character. And I'm like, there's no way this was a real guy.
Well, I mean, from what I understand, there are like concurrent accounts of an actual Muhammad. But I mean, I guess the next
Oh, yeah,
question it would be
there
is
are.
which Muhammad?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's accounts of a guy named Muhammad, but not one who lived in Saudi Arabia at the specific time at during that year. I believe it's like 6 years later, or some amount of years later. There's a so the historical evidence doesn't exactly match up.
Hmm.
But I'd have to do a bit more research, or you'd have to talk to Stop Spamming. He's the one who knows about all that side of things. He's done a lot of research on that.
Yeah, send
He
me a
just seems
message
like a
later with
fictional
that.
person because he's oh, he's an orphan, you know, so his mom and dad and his biological family wasn't around. He just magicked up out of thin air with no history of his lineage, and he was lighter skinned than everyone else in the area that he grew up, because they're constantly talking about how light his skin was. He was a Syrian orphan who grew up thinking he was Saudi Arabian. And there's like, oh, he was an orphan, but he had a cousin. Like, how does this make sense?
That's that definitely raises a few questions. Some that I'm pretty sure Muslims out there, if any would listen to this, would get a little upset by. um,
Oh, they'd probably call me super ignorant and say like I have no idea what I'm talking about and I have no idea about his history, so I have no place to talk.
yeah, that's totally valid and definitely would have nothing to do with the fact that you don't have a penis.
Yeah. Oh, if I had one, I promise you, I would go and study overseas, like, and I would just become Christian Prince 2.0, atheist Prince, because he has a degree in Islamic studies, but he has that one thing that I'm like, oh, you would be so perfect if you were an atheist.
Oh,
I don't think
well,
I'm allowed to study with the top sheikhs and scholars.
I wouldn't imagine you would be.
Nope, not over there.
Because there's a fairly common thing that a lot of us atheists, and actually I'm pretty sure a lot of other people outside the atheist community, like Christians, would say that Islam is right now where Christianity was like 500 years ago.
Jeez,
you know,
that's quite a number. Oh, I was hoping it would be closer to the present day. That's so sad.
no, it's like the whole holy war kind of thing. It really hasn't been that much of a thing in Christianity the last few hundred years. I mean, with people like Dave Dolbenmeyer, it's kind of starting to rear its ugly head again. But
Mhm.
so far there hasn't really been anything.
I can't tell if we're going forward or backwards. I mean, look, lots of people aren't vaccinating their kids anymore, and these ugly diseases are making a comeback, like measles, and people are probably going to start having polio again. And
Yeah,
uh, it's like half of the population is going backwards, and the other half might be going forward, or at least staying in the. I don't know. We should do a survey, see what people think.
I mean that'd be interesting to see. Um, so I'm curious about this too. What is the difference between the Quran and the Hadith?
Well, that's. Oh, I just assume everyone knows that. Yeah, the Quran is supposed to be the literal word of God, straight out of his mouth into Gabriel's ear, and then straight out of Gabriel's mouth into Muhammad's ear. Um, and I,
Still
I
kind of a
would
game of
say,
telephone.
yeah, Right? And I asked a Muslim, like, how do we know Gabriel's credibility and that he has perfect memory? And he laughed and he was like, because he's an angel. Why are you asking silly questions? And I said, uh, it's I was completely serious. And I said, no. So he's an angel. That means that he has perfect memory. Is that one of the attributes of an angel? And he was like, uh, well, like he didn't consider what I was actually saying, but he didn't have an answer. But basically, the hadith is more about the stuff that Muhammad said, without shush, without proclaiming that that it was, word of God, because I feel like this was done on purpose. Sometimes they would be contradictory as well. In fact, a lot of times they're contradictory. Look, the Quran contradicts itself, so of course the Quran and Hadith are going to contradict each other.
Yeah.
And Muslims play this game to, well, it's really more of like a mental gymnastics or a thing within themselves, because they don't realize it, but they'll say stuff like, if a hadith contradicts the Quran, then that hadith is invalid, and it's probably a weak hadith, and we don't use it because we know that the Quran is the ultimate authority. It's direct from God, so it's the super accurate number one thing that we take, right? And they always back themselves into a corner when they say that, because then it's like, what about this one and this one and this one? And I ask them, and then they go, and then they backtrack and they say the exact opposite. Well, the Quran can't be interpreted by itself. You need the hadith to provide context. Oh, and I'm like, stop, please. And I ask a very simple question, just one, because I've never gotten an answer for this, and I just used the one example. And I'm like, which one should we take, the Quran or hadith? If they say, hey, the Quran, and if the hadiths contradict it, then it's not valid. I say, okay, the Quran tells you can beat your wife, the hadith says you shouldn't. The hadith is contradicting the Quran, so we should throw that hadith out, right? And I've never gotten an answer for that one. In fact, when I think I commented that on a YouTube stream, and like the guy was talking to got really mad and left in a huff, and then 2 minutes later, the hangouts got invaded by a bunch of trolls who hacked it and took over it and shut it down. So I think I pissed some people off.
Well, that's that's actually kind of funny hearing about a stream getting shut down like that.
I felt like it was my fault, but I didn't say anything.
Oh, so yeah, the whole woman beating thing. There, according to what I've heard, and I don't know how valid this is because I've given like zero study time to the Quran and the Hadith. I mean, I tried reading the Quran once, but it was so bad.
Yeah,
like
it really is like mind-numbing, and you just go into a trance where you're reading it and you're not even processing it. That's why it takes, and it's a thick book, and it takes a long time to get through, because half of the words are just like the same thing repeated over and over again. There's
yes.
a bountiful paradise waiting for the believers, and God is so merciful, but the disbelievers will be burned in a torture and blah blah. It's the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to a really bad fluffer. I don't know how familiar you are with this concept of a fluffer, but you know, it's basically just sucking up to God, and you know, just trying way too hard to be flattering. You know what I mean?
To the point where it's embarrassing, and it just sounds like someone talking about themselves in the third person.
Yeah.
Because that's what I feel like it is. All praise is due to me. How egotistical do you have to be to tell someone, like, hey, you have to repeat this phrase over and over again 5 times a day? All praise is due to me.
Yeah, it was bad. I tried reading the Quran. I just couldn't do it. I checked it out of the library, and the next day I took it back.
I didn't even know they rented at the library. I have my own copy. I have the same copy that was given to me when I was like 8 years old, and I had written something really cute in it on the inside cover in like pink glitter pen, and then when I became an atheist, I ripped that page out of it. But I still read it sometimes.
So is there okay, I heard that Saddam Hussein had actually written a copy of the Quran in his own blood, and that you're actually supposed to do that as a Muslim.
No, I've never heard that. That
Okay,
wacko.
It's something I think I heard on the History Channel, so suddenly that makes a little bit more sense.
That sounds like a ritual to summon a demon.
Apparently, according to this thing I watched, it's something that he actually periodically had blood drawn for, and eventually using his own blood wrote a copy of the Quran. I'm like,
what was the end goal? He thought, like, yes, my bloodthirsty God is gonna love this birthday present, and I am gonna get into heaven for sure. We don't have like a St. Peter guarding the golden gates. I don't even know. I think they just open automatically.
I'll do it. But I'm like, imagine getting that as a birthday present or something, right? It's like, here's this book. I wrote it in my own blood.
Oh, it's like when your cat brings you a dead bird. He's like, you're gonna love this present. Oh, thank you so much.
And you like pick it up with a pair of tongs that you're gonna throw away with it.
But God's better than us. He's like, he'll actually accept it. Well, it's more like if your cat brought you a bird and then you said, thank you. Now go worship me 5 more times.
Gonna run out of birds real quick.
Being in a position where no matter how much power you had, right? If you were an omnipotent God, like, at what point would you go, hey, I think I want all these dudes, all these creations to worship me completely and utterly and devote their lives and their souls to me? It just sounds so creepy, no matter how you spin it.
Yeah. I mean, I can be pretty vain, I'll admit it, but I got nothing.
I have yet to hear a reasonable explanation for why. Oh, he doesn't need your worship. The worship is like, it's for your benefit. What? When? Where? How? It's for my benefit to worship, because in Islam, prayers are like they get converted to heaven currency. They're like, they turn into tangible things. No,
oh God, you're kidding.
Yeah, I mean, everything you do in your lifetime turns into a tangible thing. It's like your prayers, they become tangible, and your duas, that's like your mini prayers throughout the day, and your dhikr, that's like another mini prayer thing throughout the, like, all of them, it's supposed to add up, and it's like, think of it as a savings account. Every prayer is like $10 or $50, and then when you do the dhikr, that's like, well, no, when you do dua, that's like 50 cents. And then you're supposed to try to do as many of those as possible. And it's like a contest. It's like a video game. And you just have to try to do as much as possible before you die, so that you can try to accumulate, to be like a heaven millionaire. No, seriously, I don't. Oh, yeah, you've probably never heard of this, but um, there's that little thing that they do where they touch the pads of their fingers, and you have like three sections of your fingers, but the inside of your
Mhm.
hand where the knuckle creases, and you're supposed to use that to count, and repeat over and over again, Bismillah and Alhamdulillah and Allahu Akbar or Subhanallah, one of whatever. There's three of them, and you're supposed to say each one 33 times, and it adds up to 99, and that's a complete set. And then when you finish that, each one you do in your lifetime turns into a gold brick for your heaven mansion. And so when when I heard that, I was like, how is my mansion gonna be made out of 3 bricks? I was like, I better start doing these so that I can accumulate some bricks. But I still have only like, I don't know, 100 bricks maybe. So you can't make a house out of 100 bricks.
See, my brain's still stuck on the heaven currency thing, so I'm just trying to figure out in my head exactly how many prayers it takes to get something from Taco Bell at the mall.
Not many. Prayers are very valuable.
And Taco Bell's pretty cheap. That's a good point.
You can probably do it in like 3 days of prayer.
Oh, that's actually kind of a while. I mean, 3 days for
you'd
one
go hungry.
taco. Yeah,
That's $1
that's no
taco.
good.
Like the supreme crunch wrap meal.
Okay, the more filling stuff takes 3 days. I gotcha. Beej actually wants to know: do they get points for the "Peace be upon him" mantra, or is that only for Muhammad to collect?
That's a good question. Those aren't like heaven points. I I can't say for sure, because the whole "peace be upon him" thing it's unnecessary. It's like one of those things that people do when they're really extra. It's the same thing when they say Muhammad's name, they're supposed to say that subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then when they say Allah's name, there's a thing that they say at the end of that too. And I feel like there's only certain types of people who say those things every single time they say their name. Because, like, when I was Muslim, like, I would say Allah all the time, and I never ever said the thing that goes after it. Because I almost felt like it was disingenuous, like it was showing off. Look at me. I say Alhamdulillah every time I sneeze. I sprinkle in Arabic words all the time, even though that's not my language. I'm very flamboyant about my religion. I don't know. That's how it felt.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like that to me too, because I've watched some videos where usually it's Essence of Thought taking down Dawa Digital, and like he's speaking in English the whole way through, except for the Arabic he speaks after he says Allah's name or Muhammad. It's like, what the hell is the point, dude? You just completely took me out of the video.
So
You know.
it's let me see. Now I'm trying to remember, so I don't forget. So Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, yeah, that's obviously that's peace be upon him, and then what the thingy that they say after Allah. I don't know. It's so weird. There's so many like little details, like when you go in the bathroom, you're not allowed to say Allah's name in the bathroom. But if you do say it, nothing happens. You just get kind of like, oh crap, I said it by accident. You don't get struck by lightning. You don't get a demon possess you. But you're just not supposed to say it for some reason. And you're not. I don't know. There's. I don't even like to think about it. There's so many dumb little rules and details and things that are designed to take over your life, I guess. And I'd say that the modern Muslim nowadays doesn't do half those things because they're trying to do all the stuff that you talked about, like work and go to school and have a life. But to pretend that it's easy to integrate the two, to integrate, religion with a normal life, I can't can't imagine. It's basically like if westernized Muslim practices and has a normal life, well, considers that they practice and have a normal life, it's like they're a bad Muslim. They've got to be a bad Muslim because you can't be social and what's that word, when someone comes to a country and it starts with an A, assimilate, right?
Yes.
Assimilate, assimilated, and still do all these little weird tidbits.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of America is Christian, and even when I was a Christian, I found a lot of difficulty integrating that into regular life, and it, there's no shortage of Christians in America. So, yeah, I kind of get that. But we are closing in on the hour, and something
fast.
I really want to ask you, because it was recently both hijab day, or what is it, wear a hijab day and don't wear a hijab day.
I think it was the same day. I think
Yeah.
world
Yeah, it was because
World Hijab Day
yeah,
was February 1st or February 2nd. I don't even know. February 1st, I think.
one of them.
And then No Hijab Day was purposely made on the same day. So, what was your question?
I'm kind of curious about at the time you were practicing, where you stood on hijab.
Ugh. Well, I never thought of it as a choice. I thought it was mandatory. So I never felt like I have the freedom to take it off at any time if I want to. Never ever. I was like, nope, this is just something that I have to do. I I never even considered, taking it off or wanting to take it off. Maybe I would have told myself like I don't want to take it off, but it's because I didn't feel like I had the choice. Um and and yeah, I defended it a few times if someone said something to me about it, but again, it's not because I was like, this is my personal choice. Choice was never was never ever um in the equation. When I was about 16, I had my mom's friend who was a niqabi. She wore the whole deal, and and my mom was trying to get me married to her son, and I remember my wonderful friend, my wonderful secular friend was trying to convince me to not wear it anymore because she said it's not necessary. It's not even in the Quran. And I was like, "What? That is news to me. I thought it was. What do you mean it's not?" I thought it was because in the translation it says hijab, but in the actual the famous one single verse that people reference, it doesn't even use the word hijab in the original Arabic. But anyway, so my friend told me it wasn't in the Quran, and I was like, "Oh, all right." So now I have to think of it from a personal standpoint, and so I went to my friend's mom. Yeah, no, what? My mom's friend, who wears niqab, and I asked her. I said, if a Muslim girl doesn't wear hijab, will she go to hell? Like, I just went straight to the point. I wasn't like, is it not recommended? I was like, will she go to hell? Because I wanted to. I mean, if I'm not going to hell, I'm in the clear. I can still get away with being a I don't know, somewhat kind of practicing Muslim, a Muslim by faith or whatever. That's what I was trying to do. And I think she didn't know I was talking about myself because I was a hijabi. So she said to me, well, I don't want to say that, I'm not going to say that she's going to go to hell. And in retrospect, like, I get why she said that. But that was just what I thought my whole life. I thought, like, if I don't wear it, I'm going straight to hell. That's it. Do not pass go. There's no chance of heaven, right? But then when she said not necessarily, I was like, oh, so I don't have to wear this and I can still go to heaven? Like, that sounds like a win-win. I don't see any reason to continue wearing it. God knows what's in my heart and all that stuff. So I was like, oh, all right, bye. I took it off. It was like after I had that conversation with her, she had no idea that she played a hand in my decision to not wear it anymore. And I can't tell you how it felt like to go outside without it after wearing it since 6 years old and it being such a habit. Because I can't say like, oh, it being a part of who I am, because it's not a part of who I am. It's not attached to me any more than glasses are a part of who I am. No, I just need them to see. but it's not like my personality, right? It's just something that I thought I had to do, but mostly I would say habit, right? Because I was just so used to it. And what is that saying about comfort? Anyway, I guess humans don't like change in a lot of ways. So I spent so long not even considering that it was a possibility. And the last time I had gone without it, I was 6 years old. I didn't even remember what it felt like. 6 years old was an eternity ago. So well, how old was I? 18, maybe? I don't remember, but I just know, like, I just remember it was summer and my parents were at work. So I just like took it off and dressed normally in like jeans and a shirt. And I went outside and I was walking on the sidewalk and it was just like a wonderful summer breeze. And it just passed right through my scalp. And I was like, oh, what is this? This is amazing. I can feel the sun. This feels so great. And I can smell the summer air. Obviously, like, I could still smell, but I can't explain how much of a difference in experience, in sensory perception it is from just your hair. Because it's like having it on and covering your hair, it creates like a cloud of humidity for your scalp, especially if it's summer and you're sweating. I can't explain it. It's like, it's not even like wearing a hat. It's like wearing a hat, but you cover your ears too. So like try wearing a hat every single day and then take the hat off. And you're like, okay, this is a relief.
See, I know for a fact I couldn't even wear just a hat because, like, okay, so I wear this flat cap all the time. I love this thing, but I couldn't wear it every day, particularly not in the summer. So I don't know how you could possibly wear like hijab is more of a thin and light version of it, right? I mean, niqab is obviously the full body.
Because hijabs can be heavy, and I had some very heavy ones. It's just like they're not that breathable. I've had cotton ones. I've had ones that I don't even know what's the name of the fabric, but it was kind of rough and it chafed my ears. And I've had ones that chafed the skin right off my ears, and I'd have little scabs on my ears. And and I remember being in the Islamic school, and it was like hurting so bad that I pushed my ears out, and like I'd have a teacher be like, "Oh, we cover our ears here." And not everyone can afford the luxury of super soft fabrics for their hijab. So it's like such a it's such an unnecessary like extra thing. It's like the types of fabric and then the 1.5 million safety pins that you have to buy and you always lose. And poking yourself with the safety pin trying to put it on. It's but you know, people don't talk about that because it's trivial. It's trivial to avoid an eternity in the fiery torment. But it's not even necessary according to the Quran.
Yeah. So here's another one for you. What do you think about the protests over in the Middle East? I want to say Iran is where, Iran, yes, is where most of these protests are happening, where women are taking off hijab.
Yes, I love that. And the reason for that is because the people in power in the government who imposed what do they call compulsory hijab laws are not the majority of the population, because the actual citizens don't want to wear it. And of course, that's why they're protesting, because it's more of a smaller percentage of the population who are the ones seen in these videos, like trying to shame the women into putting it back on. And then there will be some other, yeah, because if you watch the videos specifically from Iran, you'll see more passersby defending the woman and telling the guy or girl, whoever is heckling her, to leave her alone. And it's because they don't want to, they just do it because it's the law and they have to. And they would love to change the law because they didn't have to wear it 50 years ago. It's not like it's been the law forever. This massive reform swept over like all those countries. They didn't used to wear it in Egypt either, or in a ton of countries in Africa. And it was like all of us, in the 50s and 60s and maybe even the 70s. Well, it depends on the country, but these places only became more strict like that in recent years.
All right. Well, that's about all I have for you. But what I like to do is at the start and end of each interview, I like to have my guest introduce their channel, and you sort of did that yourself at the beginning. So go ahead and do it here again.
Oh, sure. I have my YouTube, which is, I think it's just, no, it's not Lily Cuervo. It's Lily Cuervo Logic. And you put the link in the description, yep. Right? Okay.
I did.
So it should be there. And I super duper promise I am actually gonna put some more videos on there. I didn't do it because I was in a certain situation, working like 100 hours a week. But I quit that job. So I actually have a ton of free time right now. And I already started working on my plans for my next video. I just have to sit down and actually edit it and do it. And I have my Twitter, which I post on pretty regularly. You link that as well.
Yep, I did. So everybody definitely be sure to head over to Lily's channel and give her a subscription right after this is done. But that will about do it. Thank you for coming on, Lily. It was a great talk.
A pleasure.
Yeah, we're going to have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, we should do a group chat with you and the boys. And the girls.
I was gonna say just okay, but
he deleted it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk offline here. But yeah, that'll do it for this one, everybody. Thank you again, Lily, for coming on. And sorry I started so late.
No, it's fine.
I started dinner way too late.
You didn't announce it or anything.
Yeah, so I need to start announcing these things because otherwise I just forget.
Oh, I put
admittedly, my name. My memory is admittedly pretty bad, so. But thank you for bearing with my tardiness, and
Okay, I hope it was educational, fun.
I found it both educational and fun,
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm sure everybody else in the chat thought so as well.
Okay, bye everyone.
So,
See you later.
take it easy, everybody.